Welcome back to the shop and to the channel. It is long past time to make some progress on the 1960 13-inch South Bend lathe. I've had this thing disassembled for quite some time now. As a matter of fact, I started this video over 6 months ago, and I'm just now getting around to editing it and getting it uploaded to YouTube. Regardless, back to the project at hand here, which is to make this motor housing look a little bit nicer than it does right now. When I disassembled all the major components of the lathe, I took a little bit of time to strip off the old paint, and you can still see some remnants of a little bit of body filler that South Bend used when they manufactured it. But, they only did as much as they really needed to do to sell the lathe. So it still has a good number of blemishes. You can see, obviously, the roughness of the casting, and you can see a few spots where there's still some body filler. I'm investing a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of effort into this lathe, and I really want to make it the best that I can make it. So I opted to go the same route that South Bend did when these were manufactured, but maybe going a little bit more beyond. And that is to use some body filler to smooth out this casting and give it at least a really good paint job, as good a paint job as I could do in my shop. Now, I'm not expecting this paint job to come out as nice as a show car that you might see at a Barrett Jackson auction, but I would like to give it at least a shot at getting something that certainly looks better than it does now. I still need to do a little bit of prep work before I can apply any kind of body filler, and part of that is kind of sanding down the casting a little bit and making sure that there's no remaining paint left anywhere. I'm really kind of surprised at how sloppy the job that South Bend did originally, because, like I said, they went through the effort of applying body filler, but they didn't really do all that great of a job. So there's still quite a bit of it that has to be removed. There was quite a bit more factory body filler up here near the top of the housing. This part of the casting is actually pretty rough. I've got some acetone here in one of these compressed air spray bottles. I did a video a while ago in rebuilding a few of these things, and I really like having them in the shop. This is just to try to clean off the remainder of any kind of dust, sanding dust that's still on the casting. I bought a bunch of these silicone rubber cones that fit into these holes. I don't think that all of these holes will eventually get used in the final version of this lathe. I think some of these are used for some stuff that was mounted on the back that won't be remounted. But I don't want to cover them with body filler and then have to find them later if I do want them. So I'd rather have a couple of extra holes in the back of this thing than to try to chase down where they ended up. I'm using, just original formula Bondo automotive body filler. I've had this can for a little bit, still good. I've used this stuff on other projects. Not all of them have I recorded for YouTube, and it's fairly easy to work with if you don't make too large of a batch. This stuff isn't all that difficult to mix. You take some of the body filler out of the can, and then you mix a proportionate amount of the hardener with it. And the can gives you the instructions on what that ratio is. I have a tendency to err a little bit on the side of a little less hardener, because what I don't want is this thing to start hardening up too quick when I'm still trying to work with it. So my goal here with this is just to put on a skim coat. I don't want to lay this down too thick. I just want to fill those valleys and then come back and sand off what doesn't need to be there. And unfortunately, I had more video of the process of putting this on, but somehow it got lost. And I'm really disappointed in that, because I think it would have been interesting to show how this really is the biggest mistake I think I've ever made in the shop, which was applying body filler to the largest piece that I've ever worked with in the shop. Everything I've done up to this point has been pretty small, and this was just a little more than I had ever done before, and it did not go well. And so here I am about 6 months after that last clip was recorded. And the reason is because I've been avoiding this job. I have not been looking forward in the least of the prospect of how much sanding I'm going to have to do to this motor housing in order to get it even remotely presentable. I'm actually fearful that it's going to end up worse than it was than when I started. I had hoped to get this project started earlier last fall, but things just kind of got pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And the reason why I wanted to start it earlier, even though I really didn't want to do this project or this part of the project, was because it's winter now in Northeast Ohio. And even though right now it's been a bit rainy, it's cold outside, and I really wanted to do this outside because I knew this was going to be a mess. You notice I'm not doing it actually in my workshop. I'm doing this in my garage. I've moved my wife's car out into the driveway, and I'm using vacuums where they'll work, hoping to minimize just how much of a mess I end up making. I have two different sanders that I'm trying to use here. One is my cordless palm sander from Rigid. It takes a 5-inch sanding disc, and I can hook it up to a vacuum, and it does a pretty good job of containing the dust. I'm actually pretty happy about that, but it's not 100%. The biggest problem that it has is it's a bit on the heavy side with that battery hanging off of it. It's after a little while, it's not all that comfortable to sit here and hold. Well, the other sander I have is a pneumatic automotive style sander. This one's a lot lighter. Again, I can hook up a vacuum to it, but I don't think it's as efficient as the Rigid as far as the dust removal. But I think it's a 6-inch pad, which means it's a little bit more aggressive. And of course, if I'm not sanding something where the entire disc is coming in contact with the surface, it does a really poor job of containing the dust. So my garage is going to be covered in this dust. Trying to figure out a good way to get down into this little radius part at the base of the motor housing. So I've got a little die grinder, angle die grinder with a sanding disc. And this will work at least some, but it's not really ideal, partly because there's a lot of moisture in these airlines and it has a tendency to come out of these cheap angled die grinders. Here, this is a little like Scotch-Brite pad, and I think it'll work to remove the bulk of the junk. But the likelihood is I'm going to need to end up reapplying some Bondo because I think I'm going to end up taking off more than I really wanted. When I applied the Bondo originally, the motor housing was sitting almost all the way on the ground. It was only a few inches above the ground. And so as I was applying it to these lower parts, it was a little less accurate. I loaded this up way more than I needed to. And so, again, this is taking a lot of effort to remove all this extra Bondo. Some of this I am going to have to do by hand, and one thing I like to use on curved objects is these sanding sponges. They do a really good job of conforming to the shape of whatever I'm working with. Well, I am making at least a decent amount of progress here. I've got quite a bit of it, removed that needs to be removed, and it's it's feeling fairly decent now. This is still 80 grit sandpaper. I'm probably not going to go any finer at this point, not until I get the bulk of this removed. And I think what I might end up doing is spraying this with a coat of primer and just seeing how it looks, because it will look markedly different once I prime it versus how it is now. And unfortunately, that's about as far as I got in order to get this video edited and uploaded to YouTube for my normal weekly schedule of Sunday at noon Eastern Time. And that little bit of sanding, which isn't even close to being complete, just for this one side, actually took me quite a while. And I have a lot more to do on this face as well as the other three sides on this thing. And where the hinges mount on the one on the front of it, that's going to be even more interesting. So this is the biggest mistake that I've ever made in the shop, and that is doing all of this Bondo all at once. What I should have done was done this in small stages, maybe done one side at a time. But as it stands right now, I've got half a can of Bondo on this thing, and I'm going to end up having to remove about 99.5% of it. I have hours more sanding to do on this thing, and I'm certainly not going to record that and put that junk up on YouTube. But hopefully I'll have some other projects that I can record and get up. But this one right here is going to be a constant project that I have told myself that I want to have at least this piece right here finished by the end of January. which is about 20 days from now. And that means sanded, primed, and all ready for paint. So wish me luck. Well, if you got this far in the video, I appreciate it. Hit that like button, hit that dislike button. If you didn't like it, leave me a comment. I'm sure the comments are going to be full of how I screwed this up or did something wrong, because I know that I did. But regardless, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.